that when I talk about joy, I'm not really talking about joy getting a little bit more over the next 50 years. What I'm really talking about is how to get a little bit more joy, a few more moments of joy, increase the occasions of joy just in that daily experience. It may be the same bad marriage. It may be the same dead-end job. And yet we all have to make a choice over whether or not that bad marriage and dead-end job will provide the tenor and the color and the real substance, the quality of my life as a human being, or if there is a way for me to think about the world in a way that would make that different.
Hello again, everybody. This is Heartbeat, the podcast, featuring insights and teaching from the more than 50 years of work put together by our friend Landon Saunders. On today's episode, Landon is visiting with a group, and they are exploring the meaning of all of this. What do we get up in the morning and go to work for? As we go about our days, what is the purpose in everything that we do? Here again is Landon Saunders.
I've called this the labors of joy. Now, part of the reason for calling it the labors of joy is that we're going to have to do a little bit of thinking to get there. And it is, we sort of labor to go through life. The other thing is that I've found very suggestive the ancient Greek and Roman myth about Hercules. Now, on the Greek side, it was Heracles and the 12 labors, but on the Roman side, it was Hercules and the 12 labor. Now, how much do we know about Hercules? If you were giving a word, when I say the word Hercules, what would be the descriptive word you would give? Strong, yeah. If we don't know anything else about the Hercules story, we know that it's about strength. We also know that if I am going to move through this world, given the things that I have to deal with, it's going to take a little strength, isn't it? And so that sort of sparked my energy. And then as I looked into the story and found out that among all his deeds and all his exploits, that after being the great warrior and winning these great battles and having all these great successes, that this same character had tremendously violent impulses to destroy that raged within him. And on one occasion, after all of his great wins and successes, he attacked and tried to kill his most beloved nephew, Iolaus. Iolaus managed to escape. He was more fortunate than were his 6 children. He killed his 6 kids, killed his family. So here is one who is sort of celebrated in heroic proportions, but when we examine his life, we find all of these real tragedies that are also a part of his story, so that one can ask, is there any hope for a man who has killed his children? It is helpful for us to remind ourselves that there are a lot of children today in respectable homes that get slain by their parents. Not physically and literally, but with attitudes and emotions and abuses. The story really isn't so far away. It's exaggerated, isn't it? Because that's the nature of a great myth. Everything is exaggerated. He consulted the oracle of Delphi to see what he could do, because he wanted to be immortal. Well, who doesn't? You say, I would settle sometimes just for a great life. But underneath it, when you get right down to the moment and you face the big D, you'd like to think, well, maybe there is something else. And so you get your imagination in high gear at that point. And it's helpful for the people around you, at least still in our time, if they can sort of feel that. And so with a Hercules, what is the hope? Can a person who has killed their children have a life of joy? Can they have a life that on the last day of life they can say, this was a good life? Can a human being do anything, be guilty of anything, guilty of any crime, any failure, that somehow makes joy out of their reach, puts joy out of their reach? Can that happen to anybody? And again, it goes to the question of what my view of a human life is. And my view is still that a human life is the most important thing in the world. I have an incredibly high view of a human life. A lot of my friends in various forms of religion and philosophy somehow hold a very low view of human life. I think I have looked into the abyss at some of life's greatest horrors throughout the world. But I can report today that my view of the stature of a human being is undiminished. I have a very high view of a human being, no matter what the human being does. And so, I think if Hercules can do it, and so he goes and consults the oracle of Delphi and gets the instruction that he is to go and subject himself to King Eurystheus, whom he recognizes as an inferior human being. And he goes into this deep depression. Have you ever worked for somebody that was you thought really inferior to you? You take orders from a person that you consider to be dumb and giving dumb orders. Well, that was where Hercules was. He was to submit himself to a person that could ask you to do some real dumb things, albeit great sort of things. And so his friends all encourage him, and they say, well, maybe there's no other way to do this. And so he goes over and submits himself, and the king is going to assign him 10 labors, and then he discarded 2 of them so that it became 12 labors. And those 12 labors can be thought of in so many different ways and with so many variations and with so many interpretations. And we're going to walk down sort of one path. And as we begin the journey, we're going to remember that a human being can be guilty of nothing that can preclude the life of joy, no matter where it starts. It can start in the last year. I have no regard for any view of human life that cannot be completed in the last 5 minutes of a person's life. I have no regard for a view of that. A human life is of such inestimable value that if they don't wake up until the final moments, I want to go on record as recognizing the courage and the power of those last 5 minutes. Nothing that happens to us can preclude the life of joy. It can make it tougher. I'm not saying it won't be difficult. All of our experience is not going to be the same, but I'm simply saying the bottom line can be joy. The second thing as we begin this is that joy is not at the end of the 12 labors. You don't go through 12 labors thinking, now if I can just successfully get through these, then I'll be happy. That's the way we do it. That's the way we think, isn't it? But in this story, it is the presence of joy that enables one to triumph in the labor. It's not at the end. It's what is now. Someone said the only thing, I think it was Tolstoy who said, the only thing that keeps us from being happy is we do not know that we are happy. We just don't know it. Self-evident kinds of things. We're talking about the deep, fundamental nature that underlies human life. And the third point is that struggle, as we've stressed already, is not the enemy of joy. It is the occasion of joy. Maybe we should take a moment and deal with an objection or two, because sometimes I've talked with people who say, Landon, it all sounds good, but I can't do it. My life is too drab. I can't do it. And I think one, at least beginning place is that if a human being can still smile, there's a lot of hope. If they can still smile. The smile runs so deep in a human life. Sometimes I sit in the morning, and if it's a good morning, and if I sit for a moment and I just think about and take in the experience of being alive and being human, and take in the experience of the flowers and the trees and so many reminders of the goodness of the world, pretty soon a smile appears that I can feel coming up within me before it arrives. It's a matter of sort of how we think about it, how we go about that. Another is, a doctor said to me, I was dealing with the concept of joy with some physicians, and during the question and answer period, a doctor said, Landon, how in the world can a woman who's in the final stages of cancer, lying in the bed, death near, body racked with pain, have joy? Well, in a sense, she can't. And wouldn't it be a stupid thing to do to say, be joyful? Wouldn't it be out of place? But I'll guarantee you this. If that same woman has lived all of her life out of the center that we're describing today, I promise you, if anything can be helpful during those final hours, that will support her. I've seen people die both ways. I saw a woman die literally in exactly that condition. But I also knew that she was a woman who had lived her days with that view of the world. And through her pain, as her children gathered about her bed and 3 or 4 close friends, she somehow managed through that face that was absolutely racked with pain. We were able to see some sort of gentleness and some sort of weak smile that sort of signified to everyone a sort of peace, and that somehow signaled to her children that even this would pass. It's a style, it's the way that we live that I think is so. And then another we've alluded to is, how can you do it in the midst of bad circumstances? And I think, again, if circumstances are sort of a precondition to joyfulness, then a person can't. But if the bad circumstance simply sort of levers up the challenge, and without psyching yourself up, you know, I have some appreciation for just positive thinking. But when positive thinking is not linked to what is fundamentally real, if it's not linked to what you have accepted as fundamentally true about your life, then even positive thinking is apt to give way. It's better if, and so what we're trying to describe here is not some sort of formula or some sort of description for how life can be a little easier or a little bit more joyful. What we're pointing to is to try to increase the awareness and expand the consciousness that maybe joyfulness lies at the center of a human life, rightfully so. And if that becomes my consciousness, then my chance for a better experience is going to be significantly better. I have a friend who visited a person who was dying in the last stages of cancer and had the good sense to raise the right question. He did not say to this fine person, "How are you?" What could she say? "Oh, fine." Now that's maybe what we would say. I'd try to say that if somebody asked me such a dumb question. But he put the question this way: how are you doing? How are you getting along with the cancer? It's a different question, isn't it? And she said, "I have taken a very unwelcome guest into my body that I'm trying to make as comfortable as I can." Now, the first labor that was assigned to Hercules was to go and kill the Nemean lion. Now, the Nemean lion was this ferocious beast that killed everything around. And so Hercules sets out, and at first, the lion has killed so many that he can't even find anyone to tell him where the lion is. But he finally discovers where the lion is, and when he sees him, he's just coming back from a day's slaughter, and he's all spattered with blood. And Hercules begins to try to kill that lion. How's he going to do it? The biggest problem was the pelt. The lion had such a thick hide, such a thick pelt, that it resisted iron and bronze and stone. Still, Hercules tries, and he first of all unleashes a flight of arrows that just bounced off this thick hide. And next he takes his sword, and he gets up close enough, and he drives it with all his might, and the blade just bends like lead. And next he takes his club, and he hammers him hard over the head. And at that, the lion went trotting off to his cave, not because he was really hurt, but he had a certain singing in his ears. Then Hercules nets one entrance to the cave, goes to the other entrance, corners the lion, and manages to get a chokehold on him, not before he bit one of his fingers off, got a chokehold on him, and thus was able to kill the lion. He puts him on his shoulders and carries him back to the king, lays him down, and takes his claws, which are the only things sharp enough to penetrate that hide, and he flays the lion and takes the pelt and makes a cloak for himself, which he wears during some of the other labors. Now, what connection does that have to joy? But some of the things that strike me, and one that strikes me most, is that hide, that pelt. Have you ever heard this? You got to have a thick skin to survive in this world. A thick skin. When these things hit, what is one way to deal with them? When we're in constant, painful situations, what oftentimes can happen? You just have to get a thick hide, don't you? Now, is some of that good? Of course it is. If it is worn as a cloak, so that you can take it off once in a while. The problem sometimes with professional people is that they identify so closely to what they do at work, and if they're a boss, they're telling people to do this and do that and do something else, and everybody sort of marches at the command, or at least you hope that they would, and then you get home and confront your 16-year-old child who looks at you and says, "You're stupid," and you put this big pelt on, and those words bounce off, and you lash back, and what do you do in the relationship with the kid? Wall them out. Shut them off. If, on the other hand, that person understood that I can live in the presence of my challenges and difficulties in a way that I don't build up such a thick hide, such insensitivity, that I am totally immune to other people, to other cries, to other questions, to intimacy and relationship. If I understand that at times, yes, I need some protection, and particularly on my backside, and so I wear a cloak that can repel and help me deal with some of the tragedies and pain. But when I go home, I can take it off. And I could say to that 16-year-old, you're probably right. I'm probably an idiot. And if I'm calculating right, I'll probably be an idiot another 3 to 5 years. Every parent of teenagers has to go through the idiot stage. And it's a lot better if you can laugh at it once in a while than if we just move down to where it's just constant pain. Richard Pryor said when his mother would whip him, he said, when your mother she would get up this rhythm, and he said, you don't want to interrupt her because she would say, Richard, don't you ever do that again. And if you interrupt her in the midst of it, she says, what? And then starts over, Richard, don't you. The thick hide. Have you ever worked with an employer that was immune to anything that you say? There are employers that are cut off from all kinds of rich ideas because they have lost any capacity to take the coat off and just listen. The little boy that stands before the vending machine looks through the glass of that vending machine, and what does he see? All these beautiful, delicious things, but he can't get to them. What does the child have to have? The right coin. If he's got the right coin, then he knows how to get in and can release some of that. How many children, how many little girls and little boys look at their parents? Parents who've been hurt a lot. Parents who have developed thick hides. Parents who are protected against the cries of the children. How many husbands, how many wives look at each other? They know there are all kinds of good things in there, but you don't know how to get in. You don't have the coin to unlock it. And so you stand there dying 1,000 deaths, all because no coin. If somehow I know that this is the world that I'm up against, and that one of the great dangers of living a joyful life is dealing with all of that in a way that shuts me off inside myself, that creates barriers and defenses galore, that shut other people out of my life because I'm afraid that I might be hurt yet one more time. And you might be. But the life that is insulated against any possible pain is a questionable life. Is it worth living? And so this first labor sort of goes to a way to live in the world, a way to live in the midst of pain with an awareness of what can happen to us, that I can resist it in a way that I cut myself off. And in cutting myself off, I cut myself off from love. I cut myself off from creativity. I cut myself off from growth and from change. I cut myself off from intimacy. I cut myself off from my children. I cut myself off from friends. How does one not do that? I don't know if there are formulas. And I try not to give too many formulas. Being conscious is the best way. If I am conscious of this, if I'm conscious of the danger, and if I'm a reminder, you will do the right thing if you just pause and think long enough to do it. The two symbols that I like to think about in describing presentations like this, or when one tries to be of encouragement to others, one symbol is a funnel. And sometimes people sort of come through, and parents can be like this with their children, and sometimes one spouse can be like this with another spouse. Have an attitude that says, look, I've got this wonderful little funnel, and if you'll tilt your head at about a 45-degree angle, I'll put my funnel in your ear, and I'll pour you full of all these wonderful things that I know, and then you can be like me. But does anybody find that very appealing? I don't. When somebody comes at me like this, and you know, people come at me like this. And when they do, you know what I try to do? I try to start talking before they do. I had some people come to my door, and I knew there was going to be a long spiel. And so with the first question, I said, sure, I know the answer to that. And I just talked and talked and talked, and I just saw them getting more and more uncomfortable. But, you know, and then they're followed by another question. And I say, yeah, you want to come in? And I've got more on this one, you know. Now, it's wearing my armor as a cloak. You know, I could take it off, but I've also got a little bit of joyful protection against some of that. The other image is tuning fork. The tuning fork, when you strike it, resonates and sounds a note, and that can correspond to a sound that I can make and give me pitch. I think when we're dealing with one another and dealing in relationships, the tuning fork is a lot more powerful symbol than the funnel is. That what we're attempting to do in experiences like this is not give new formulas and new fixes. What we're really trying to do is resonate something that's already in you and just awaken it a little more and give encouragement sort of to it.
This whole thing is about joy. Now that is worth working on. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and we invite you to be with us again in a couple of weeks for the next episode of Heartbeat, the podcast. In the meantime, if you'd like to learn more about other resources that are available from Heartbeat, visit the website thisisheartbeat.com. It's made possible by friends of Heartbeat. And we hope you'll join us again next time for This is Heartbeat, the podcast.